Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yasodanandana Prachachana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading from Canto 10, chapter 62. And there are two texts this morning, text 8 and 9, and we'll be chanting together text 8. Tachinutva Bhagavan Krudam Ketuste Bhajate Yadam Tvadarpaginam Havin Mud. It looks like my computer changed something. Go ahead. Samyugam Matsamnate. Computer changed a few things. Tat Chinutva Bhagavan Krutam Ketuste Bhajate Yadam Tvadarpaginam Bhavin Mudham Samyugam Matsamnenate Tachrutva Bhagavan Krutam Ketuste Bhajate Yadam Tvadarpaginam Bhavan Mudham Samyugam Matsamenate. Please chant. Tachrutva Bhagavan Krudam Ketuste Bhajate Yadam Darpagrinam Bhaven Mudham Samyugam Matsamenate Tachrutva Bhagavan Krudam Ketuste Bhajate Yadam Tadrapagrinam Bhaven Mudha Samyugam Matsamenate. Thank you very much. The word for word. Tat, that. Shrutva, hearing. Bhagavan, the Lord. Kruda, angry. Keta, flag. Te, your. Bhajate is broken. Yada, when. But, your. Darpa, pride. Grinam, destroyed. Bhavet, will be. Mudha, a fool. Samyugam, battle. Mat, to me. Samena, with him who is equal. Te, your. And the translation for text 8. Hearing this, Lord Shiva became angry and replied, quote, your flag will be broken, fool, when you have done battle with one who is my equal. That fight will vanquish your conceit, close quote. And there's a short purport, BBT purport. Lord Shiva could have immediately chastised Vanasura and personally destroyed his pride, but since Banasura had been such a faithful servant of his, Shiva did not do so. In text 9, Iti yuta kumati hishta syagriham pravishan nirpam pratikshan girisatesham sya virya nanasanam kudihi. And the translation for text 9. Thus advised, unintelligent Banasura was delighted. The fool then went home, O king, to wait for that which Lord Girisha had predicted, the destruction of his prowess. And the BBT purport. Here, Banasura is described as Kudi, having bad intelligence, and Kumat, foolish, because he completely misunderstood the actual situation. This demon was so arrogant that he was convinced no one could defeat him. He was delighted to hear that someone as powerful as Lord Shiva would come to fight with him and satisfy his itching for battle. Even though Shiva had said that this person would break Bana's flag and destroy his prowess, the demon was too foolish to take this statement seriously and eagerly awaited the fight. At the present moment, materialistic people are delighted by the many unprecedented facilities for sense gratification. Although it is clear that death, both individual and collective, is quickly approaching them, modern sense gratifiers are oblivious to their inevitable destruction. As stated in the Bhagavatam 2:14, Pasyanapi na pasyati, even though their imminent destruction is apparent, they are too blind to see it, being intoxicated by sex enjoyment and family attachment. Similarly, Banasura was intoxicated with his material prowess and could not believe that he was about to be cut down to size. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gnananjana-shlakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavan Ishvari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Panchakalpa Tarubhyas Chakri Pasindubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Roma Padaswami Iti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Good morning. So, in text 8, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is commenting that the word krodaha, which you see there, angry, implies that at first Lord Shiva became angry hearing the words that were expressed by Banasura, and he thought to kill Banasura. Then Lord Shiva reflected, and this is Lord Shiva's reflection as per Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So it's the thought that Lord Shiva had. It would be improper to kill my servant with my own hands. But if this foolish, intoxicated person who has received my mercy, thinks his 1,000 alms to be a burden, then my master, who relieves the world of its burden, will indeed take away his burden. So that's Lord Shiva's logic and his reflection when he was giving consideration to the words that Banasura had spoken. And these were the words that Banasura had spoken. Banasura had said the following: these 1,000 alms, so he's addressing Lord Shiva, these 1,000 alms you bestowed upon me have become merely a heavy burden. Besides you, I find no one in the three worlds worthy to fight. So that was a little bit earlier on. So to understand Lord Shiva's consideration of the particular course of action he was going to take, one can look at Banasura's status. What makes up Banasura? And this is written by Srila Prabhupada. So this is Srila Prabhupada analyzing Banasura and his particular status. So this is what Srila Prabhupada says. The great hero, Banasura, born of Maharaj Bali, was a great devotee of Lord Shiva and was always ready to render service unto him. Because of his devotion, Banasura achieved a great position in society, and he was honored in every respect. Actually, he was very intelligent and liberal also, and his activities are all praiseworthy because he never deviated from his promises and word of honor. He was very truthful and fixed in his vow. In those days, he was ruling over the city of Sonitapura. By the grace of Lord Shiva, Banasura had 1,000 arms, and he became so powerful that even demigods like Lord Indra were serving him most obediently. So this is Srila Prabhupada writing in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Banasura's devotion is mentioned. And that attention, because devotion implies that there's attention that's being given, there's care that's being given. And that attention and care given to Lord Shiva is mentioned by Srila Prabhupada. And this is the mention of something of the attention and care given to Lord Shiva. Banasura helped Lord Shiva in his dancing by rhythmically beating drums with his 1,000 hands. So that was a devotional act on the part of Banasura. So Lord Shiva, and Srila Prabhupada makes this generalization. So then now looking at how Lord Shiva is functioning with this, you could say, devotion coming from Banasura. So Lord Shiva, and this is written by Srila Prabhupada, is well known as Ashutosh, and he is also very affectionate to his devotees. He is a great protector for persons who take shelter of him, and is the master of all living entities in this material world. Being pleased with Banasura, he said, so this is Srila Prabhupada writing, so this is how Lord Shiva responds. We've heard a particular aspect of the character or the quality that Lord Shiva is extremely protective, extremely affectionate to his devotees. So he tells Banasura, whatever you desire, you can have from me, for I am very much pleased with you. And this is how Banasura responds. So this is the exchange, it should be master and devotee. Banasura replies, my dear Lord, if you please, you can remain in my city just to protect me from the hands of my enemies. So that's devotional exchange where there's some care and attention going towards Lord Shiva on the part of Banasura, using his 1,000 arms to assist Lord Shiva in his dancing, was reciprocated by Lord Shiva asking Banasura he could have anything he wished, and Banasura's request was just for Lord Shiva to remain in his city to provide protection. So the decision made by Lord Shiva to not kill Banasura shows his remembering the devotional mood of Banasura. He does not get Banasura to consider what in the past is responsible for being the way he is. So Lord Shiva doesn't mention that to Banasura. He doesn't mention to Banasura that the 1,000 arms that he has were in fact provided by him, Lord Shiva. So, in fact, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that Lord Shiva does note that Banasura had received Lord Shiva's mercy through being granted these 1,000 arms. And one also notes that Lord Shiva was willing to give protection to Banasura. So Banasura received two particular boons from Lord Shiva: protection for his city and these 1,000 arms that obviously enhanced his power and strength. But Lord Shiva doesn't remind Banasura about this. He doesn't remind him of how it is he has this power and strength, or how it is that he actually has not had any enemies defeat him. It was all dependent on Lord Shiva, but Lord Shiva doesn't remind him of that. But all Lord Shiva does, he remembers the devotional mood of Banasura, that Banasura was willing to do something with some sort of mood of care or attention being given to Lord Shiva. Banasura, on his part, he exhibits a certain sense of self-identity, one could say. Srila Prabhupada often talks about, having this false identity that we create. So here's Banasura's, you could say, false identity, because it's separated from his understanding of himself as a spirit soul, but the external materialistic identity, and this is Banasura's self-identity. And this is what he says to Lord Shiva: besides you, I find no one in the three worlds to fight. So his identity all has to do with, he sees himself as truly being superior to any other fighter. There is no fighter that he can match his capacity to fight in a battle. So his sense of self is closely tied to his being victorious over others in battle. So one can understand that Banasura has this passion for honor. The fact that he's expressing that he needs to assert his strength, or that he's recognizing that basically he's superior to all others in battle, it also indicates that he has this passion for honor. And one could ask the question, is a person nothing but his history? That's because if one looks at identity or how persons view themselves, it's very much connected to their history, what's transpired through their life. So Banasura has been described by Srila Prabhupada that he was receiving honor due to always keeping his promises and word of honor. So this is something of the self-identity, or that identity of Banasura, that history that makes up, how you view the person or how the person can be viewed. So it's a person who always kept his promises and his word of honor. And if we look at this, there's a very interesting thing that immediately comes up. Lord Shiva was at one time having a discussion with Sati. And this is from the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 4th canto, the 31st chapter, the 7th verse, where he explains what it is that blinds somebody to the glories of great personalities. Because we've just heard Anasura had some very good quality, but on the other hand, one can understand that he has this, you could say, almost a kind of greed for honor, because he's looking, where can I find somebody to fight? So um, here's Lord Shiva's analysis of what it is that makes somebody blind to the glory of a great personality. Because after all, Banasura addressed Lord Shiva, and it was very casual. I can't find anybody to fight you, basically my only equal. And in fact, even what you've given me, it's now a burden. Like having the 1,000 arms, you can't use them unless he's got somebody to fight. So this is what Lord Shiva says of what makes somebody blind to the glory of a great personality. So, of course, this is in the context where he's addressing Sati, where she's actually wanting to go and attend a great event held by her father Daksha. And this is Lord Shiva's analysis. Although the 6 qualities, education, austerity, wealth, beauty, youth, and heritage, are for the highly elevated, one who is proud of possessing them becomes blind, and thus he loses his good sense and cannot appreciate the glories of great personalities. So notice, one's whole history, one's whole being, that self-identity, the picture one forms of oneself. One considers one's education, one considers like what austerities one may have performed, sacrifices one's performed. So done things for others without necessarily thinking of oneself. If one considers one's wealth status, one considers one's beauty, one considers one's heritage, the family that one was born in. And if all those form a certain picture that's highly positive, but one introduces the factor of pride, then immediately one loses all good sense and can't appreciate the glories of another great personality. So pride makes one completely blind. One only sees one's own, that self-identity, the picture one's formed of oneself. So this is Lord Shiva's analysis. So one could say that Banasura's austerity in relation to his devotion to Lord Shiva, being fixed in his vow, because that's what's described about him, and the powerful position he occupied due to his 1,000 arms, the great strength and capacity he had to basically wipe out any opponent, had led to his having pride in possessing power and position, and hence his current inability to not being able to appreciate the great personality that is Lord Shiva. So drawing on Lord Shiva's argument of what it is that blinds one, we can understand that this is what has blinded Banasura at the present time. He actually possessed that pride about his power and his position, and hence he was unable to see the glory of Lord Shiva any longer, that he could casually say to Lord Shiva, these arms that you've bestowed upon me, they're actually a burden. I mean, it's the height of rudeness. But it stems from pride. And I think yesterday there was a very nice analysis made by Subal in class that harshness, coming from Ramanujacharya's breakdown, is very much interconnected with pride. So here we see that's precisely what is afflicting Banasura at the present time in his dealing with Lord Shiva. And here's Srila Prabhupada's comment. If one is conscious of his eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can utilize his material assets, such as learning and great beauty and exalted austerity for the service of the Lord. Then such assets become glorious. And Srila Prabhupada continues, unless one's material assets are used in Krishna consciousness, they may play havoc and degrade the possessor. So note, there's a deep warning note there that unless one's using all those assets that may have come one way, that were bestowed upon one, one's beauty, one's wealth, one's intelligence, if one's not using it in service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then those very same assets can actually degrade one. So there's the warning note from Srila Prabhupada. Can degrade the possessor. Lord Shiva says this of himself. So Lord Shiva gives some insight into where he stands in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That person whose body is the color of a dark rain cloud, whose carrier is the king of birds, Garuda, and who is lying on Anantashesh, the thousand-headed serpent, that Lord Vishnu, whose glories have no limit, I'm always worshipping. So that's Lord Shiva's position. So this comes from Gita Mahatmya. And in the current moment, Lord Shiva speaks to Banasura in an angry mood. He says to him, when your flag marked with the peacock is broken, you will fight with somebody who's equal to me. So that's his comment to Banasura after Banasura is complaining and telling Lord Shiva so rudely, this boon you've given me of these, well, he doesn't even say this boon you've given me. He says these mighty arms, these 1,000 arms have become a burden because I've got nobody to fight with. And Lord Shiva's response, he's angry. He says to him, when your flag is broken, that flag with the peacock, you're going to fight with somebody who's equal to me. So Lord Shiva puts it in perspective. Banasura, he can't see the greatness of Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva emphasizes that point indirectly in a sense by saying, you're going to actually have that happen to you when you fight with somebody who's equal to me. And Srila Vishwanath gives the following insight. He says that Lord Shiva says this to Banasura, in fact, to actually gratify Banasura, or sort of make him pleased in a way. And why that is you will fight with a person with unlimited splendor. That's what he's not actually telling Banasura. That the person he's going to be fighting with actually has unlimited splendor. And those words were Samena Sa. So that description Krishna gives of himself. He says, know that all opulent, beautiful, and glorious creations spring from but a spark of my splendor. And Lord Shiva doesn't state who Banasura is going to fight with, but just the fact that he says that it's somebody with unlimited splendor, it brings to mind Krishna. Because Krishna says that everything that's beautiful and opulent and glorious springs from him. It's just a little spark of his splendor. So in fact, Srila Prabhupada is commenting that anything that's extraordinarily opulent should be considered to represent Krishna's opulence. So now of interest in this context is that Lord Krishna gives a list of qualities that belong to those of a godly or a divine nature. So even though these qualities, when you break them down, it can be assigned to particular segment of society or particular spiritual order, it's just very nice hearing the qualities. So these are godly qualities: being fearless, purifying one's existence, cultivating spiritual knowledge, giving charity, being self-controlled, performing sacrifice, studying the Vedas, practicing austerity, being simple, being non-violent, being truthful, being free from anger, being renounced, being tranquil, having an aversion to fault finding, having compassion for all living beings, being free from covetousness, being gentle, being modest, being steady in determination, having vigor, being forgiving, having fortitude, being clean, and being free from envy, and for the passion for honor. Notes. So one needs to be free from the passion for honor. So immediately, one's mind goes to Banasura. Uh, so it would mean that he doesn't fall into this category, because already this listing of godly qualities, it requires being free from this passion for honor. And Banasura is displaying that he certainly has a great passion for honor. So, um, so it's interesting to note in this listing of godly qualities that Lord Shiva, who's transcendently situated, a note is made that he does check his anger with Banasura. So he's angry with Banasura when Banasura is so rude, but he checks his anger, and that's one of the godly qualities. And of course, one understands that naturally Lord Shiva has that. He checks his anger with Banasura. And actually, it's interesting because that particular quality of not having a passion for honor is usually applied to the sutra section of society in the breakdown Srila Prabhupada does of these godly qualities, because still that section of society, if it's in the Vedic Varnashram system, is still a category of society that's in the process of spiritual elevation. So apparently that section of society particularly has this problem of having that tendency to want to become puffed up with their status, interestingly enough. But it's important that they just remain in their own status, because after all, they're serving all the other orders in society, or the other sections of society. And it's their duty to offer respect to the higher orders. So it's very incorrect for somebody in the position of the lowest section or the lowest rung in the social division to actually start to become proud of their position, because then it means that the respect to the higher orders will get tampered with. And that's something of the problem that Banasura, as not putting him necessarily into that sutra category, because clearly he's not falling into the categories of possessing divine qualities, even though he does show this adherence to vows and truthfulness, although that isn't specifically listed here. But, the practice of austerities is there as a godly quality, but in his case, it's tempered with this problem of having this passion for honor. So, by way of contrast, and this was read yesterday, there are the qualities of those that don't fall into those having a divine nature, but those having a more demoniac nature. And these are those qualities: pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness, and ignorance. These are the qualities that belong to those of a demoniac nature. So notice it's very few qualities in relation to those of a godly nature, but it's qualities that are very prominent: pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness, and ignorance. So we see that Banasura had demonstrated something of this, both his harshness towards Lord Shiva, I mean, being so not expressing gratitude for what he'd received, but instead being dismissing of the boon he'd received with having his 1,000 arms, that it permitted him to actually be able to defeat all others, and having had the assistance of Lord Shiva in protecting his city, for not actually acknowledging that, so a kind of ignorance that he was dependent on Lord Shiva. And also this arrogance to actually, I mean, apart from it being harsh, there's also a certain arrogance. I've got no one to fight with. So, um, and also persons in this category, Srila Prabhupada says, those of a demoniac nature with these particular qualities, they generally don't know what's to be done, what's not to be done, and they're not submissive to authority. And that's perhaps is something that one can infer from how Banasura is addressing Lord Shiva. He isn't actually submissive to Lord Shiva. And that's one of these demoniac qualities, because naturally, where there's pride, there's that incapacity to acknowledge the position of somebody greater than yourself. So, now, the interpretation of Lord Shiva's statement is of this nature, and this is Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He explains that Shiva addressed Banasura as, O Lord, that word was Kumatihi, your pride will be destroyed in battle. That's what Lord Shiva tells Banasura. So he specifically, and Srila Vishwanath points out, he's actually telling Banasura, your pride's going to be destroyed. So he's highlighting a particular quality that he's recognizing in Banasura. So by Lord Shiva's statement, Banasura is thinking like this: I can deduce that someone who's most powerful is going to come and relieve my itching for battle. So that's what Banasura is hearing. He's not hearing, your pride's going to be destroyed. He's hearing, oh, from what Lord Shiva is saying, I can deduce somebody's going to come and my urge for this itch for battle is going to be satisfied. That's all he hears. So that thing of needing to improve character, that component's missing in Banasura. And Srila Vishwanath continues. This is Srila Vishwanath commenting. Thinking thus, Banasura became delighted, because he's thinking, oh, my itch for battle is going to be satisfied. I can deduce this from Lord Shiva's statement. So, while waiting for that breaking of his flag indicated by Lord Shiva, by which his own powers would be destroyed, Banasura thought, when will my flag be broken? So imagine, he's been told he's going to be defeated, and his pride's going to be crushed. All he's hearing is, oh yeah, I can deduce something's going to come who's powerful that I can fight with. And then the next thing he's thinking is, oh, when is my flag going to be broken? He's not hearing defeat. He hears his flag's going to be broken. That's a sign of defeat. And he's delighted, thinking, when's my flag going to be broken? So actually, Banasura suffered from, and the Sanskrit was kudi, having bad intelligence, because he was eager without good reason. So there was not a good reason to be eager. He was being told his pride's going to be destroyed. He's going to be defeated, basically. And he's delighted. Somebody's going to come and fight with me. That's as far as he thought, because he's working on the assumption nobody can defeat me. Overlooking the fact that he's now lost Lord Shiva's protection, overlooking the fact that he's actually been very harsh and very arrogant towards Lord Shiva and shown his complete disrespect towards Lord Shiva. And there's an explanation by Srila Prabhupada what it actually means to worship Lord Shiva. And this is how Srila Prabhupada puts it. Devotees of Lord Shiva gradually come to the platform of spiritual identification. Um, and in fact, auspicious life begins from the point of spiritual identification. So you have to identify yourself outside of that self identity you've created based on your past, which in Banasura was, in the case of Banasura, was, you could say, his truthfulness, his adherence to vows, his capacity to defeat enemies. Um, one has to go beyond that if one's a worship of Lord Shiva and come to the point of identifying oneself as a spiritual being. Because that's the auspicious thing when one comes to that point. Um, and there are still more duties. One has to understand his relationship with the Supreme Lord. So somebody who's worshipping Lord Shiva has to come to that point. He has to understand his relationship with the Supreme Soul. So if one is actually a devotee of Lord Shiva, he comes to this point of spiritual realization. So the implication is that Banasura hadn't come to that point. So hence it was questionable whether he was really a devotee of Lord Shiva. Because he's not intelligent enough. He stopped at one point. Um, he did not go to that point of realizing himself as spirit soul. And Srila Prabhupada says, if one is intelligent enough, he should continue to act in the way of Lord Shiva, for Lord Shiva is always absorbed in thought of Vasudev. So it means one would actually take Lord Shiva's functioning and make it one's own. And that's Banasura certainly not doing that. This is given by Srila Prabhupada's explanation of what it means to be a worshipper of Lord Shiva in the 4th canto and the 4th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Banasura, instead, he became elated that he would meet somebody who would smash him to pieces. Imagine the lack of intelligence. And Srila Prabhupada comments that it appears that foolish demoniac human beings, when unnecessarily overpowered with material opulence, want to exhibit these opulences. And such foolish people feel satisfaction when these opulences are exhausted. Imagine. This is the sign of that poor intelligence. And this is the generalization Srila Prabhupada makes. Somebody who receives all these extraordinary opulences, be it one's wealth, one's good heritage. I mean, in the case of Banasura, he was coming from Maharaj Bali. He was in that lineage. But there's that desire to actually display those opulences. The pride sets in. They have to show their opulences. Then actually, the strange thing is that when those opulences are exhausted, like it is no more, because that's the nature of material opulences, it's there for some time according to the piety that one's performed. Those opulences are given for a limited time, and then when the piety's credit is exhausted, the opulence is gone. So in the case of somebody who's very foolish and has all these opulences and has become proud, actually the strange thing is they feel satisfied when the opulence is exhausted. This is the lack of intelligence, and that was the case of Banasura. So these are some thoughts on these two verses. If there's anything to add to the discussion to expand it.
One thing that um, comes to mind is Lord Shiva's expertise in dealing with Banasura. And in one sense, it was clear that Banasura is disregarding Lord Shiva as inferior. So, although he was speaking, you're my equal or you're equal, in reality, he was very confident that he can completely defeat Lord Shiva. So he came to the understanding that he is superior to everyone. So, so Lord Shiva told him directly what's going to happen, but with the understanding, in one sense, as you read, he didn't tell Lord Ebanasura the splendor of the personality that is going to be destroying him, that someone who has unlimited powers and splendor. So, because if he says that to him, it's not, this guy equally would dismiss that. So there was no need to actually give any more details than that. Because the fact is that this fellow was not going to listen, because the fact is that they consider Lord Shiva inferior. So whatever Lord Shiva is saying is not to be taken seriously. Hence, the the analysis of, yeah, someone is going to fight you, but you don't listen, the part that he's going to defeat you. Oh, who can defeat me? Someone is going to fight me, that's good. But, the defeat part, that's your inferior delusion. So, so it's quite something of also how the spiritual master or the spiritual authority deals with, you know, a follower or a worshiper that is overwhelmed by pride and by arrogance, and that type of thing. That sometimes, you don't say certain things that the person is not prepared to follow or to understand, and or you don't pursue that. If the person is determined to actually go a certain destructive way, it shows that it's not. So, sort of a little bit of a picture of that in Lord Shiva dealing with this Vanasura. And the fact that he could have punished him and destroyed him himself, but there's a relationship that was there still of a dependent, spiritual dependent. And in one sense, Krishna is a benediction of Lord Shiva, that he declares that Krishna will destroy him. So, in one sense, being destroyed by Krishna means the blessing of having that type of connection with Krishna. So, it's quite
Thank you
something.
for your very nice thoughts that you expressed. Yeah, the first thought is interesting, that uh, the spiritual authority dealing with somebody under them who's taking their shelter, um, that spiritual authority may not actually point out the or put a halt to the direction that the person is going in. Uh, I mean, in Lord Shiva's case, he did directly state it. Your pride is going to be destroyed. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that he's actually saying to Banasura, your pride's going to be destroyed. But when one refers to a subtle component of one's consciousness, that naturally goes right over the head of somebody who, as you say, is like determined to go along a particular path. So, indeed, by not opposing or, you know, destroying, I mean, he says that Lord Shiva could have killed Banasura, but he decided not to. By allowing his pride to carry him forward, it means that Banasura is destroying himself. But the kindness of Lord Shiva that even still, as you pointed out, there's a kind of benediction inbuilt into letting Manasura's pride just destroy him, um, is that he has the benediction of actually making that connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that, Srila Prabhupada was saying that that's actually the the point at which everything becomes auspicious in the life of somebody who's a worshipper of Lord Shiva, that they understand that Lord Shiva is worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so they also take that particular functioning of Lord Shiva as their own function. They also worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So yes, there was a benediction given by Lord Shiva for this person that hadn't come to that point and didn't look like he was going to come to that point, but also allowing the prideful determination to follow its course. And yes, indeed, one can think in a situation where somebody is displaying pride that rather than, try and help them to understand that they have pride, because generally pride has no opening. You have to let the person just destroy themselves so that their pride is destroyed. So yeah, so thank you for that, those two thoughts. Thank you. So thank you very much for your very kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.